Coming up on today's show.
Networking is a great strategy for building business if it's done right. It can also be a waste of time if it's not. So I like to teach our clients to be effective networkers by being intentional and thinking about what networking is there for.
Sometimes people get this impression that the networking guy is the guy who comes in the checkered suit with just trying to work the room and shake everybody's hand, and that that's what you have to do in order to be successful at it. But what do you think of that stereotype?
And you never know who knows someone that you need to meet.
How to be an effective networker today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to talk about one of those business skills that everyone loves to hate, depending on the kind of person you are, and that is networking. It's kind of an essential thing you do to get business. It's probably one of the best ways to get business. But we're going to talk about how to really organize yourself so you can be an effective networker. And joining us is Debbie Rosemont from Simply Placed. Debbie, welcome.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
You bet. Now, you obviously are a professional organizer. You're part of NAPO, and I know you go to those conferences, and, networking is everywhere when you're in the business world, right? So, I mean, it's something that we really need to learn how to do effectively, but I think a lot of people aren't trained to do that.
Networking is a great strategy for building business if it's done right. It can also be a waste of time if it's not. So I like to teach our clients to be effective networkers by being intentional and thinking about what networking is there for. When done right, it's a great strategy for connecting and building relationships and possibly even having over time strategic partnerships, people that can refer business to you. So, we want to have some strategies in place and be organized and productive with our networking time. And I know that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people get this impression that the networking guy is the guy who comes in the checkered suit with, just trying to work the room and shake everybody's hand, and that, that's what you have to do in order to be successful at it. But what do you think of that stereotype?
Well, I definitely have met people like that. I'm sure all the listeners have as well. And, it's almost like a stereotype of like a used car salesman. You just kind of come away from that interaction feeling, ugh, like what just happened?
Right.
So there's two types of networkers. We can give them names. We can talk about someone, and I'll just use female names since I'm a female. But I can come in as card pushing Kathy. And I can come into a room and come into a networking event and, just have the intention, I'm going to get my card in as many people's hands. It's what, some people call spray and pray, like get it all out there and hope that, somebody wants to do business with you.
Yeah, it's a numbers game, right? As long as you get out 100 cards, 10 people will say yes, and out of those, it's crazy.
Yeah, but the feeling I get when I meet this card pushing Kathy is I don't want anything to do with her. Right. Usually, card pushing Kathy is kind of in for the kill. Like she wants to sell to you, and you come away with a feeling like you've got a target on your back, and someone's just almost attacked you. She's trying really hard to be interesting and on, and it just, I think it can come across as disingenuous, right. Not real. And so I like to kind of compare her to a successful Sally. So this is another type of networker, someone who, gets networking for what it could be. And that is, planting seeds, meeting people to see what you could do to help them, building connections, starting to cultivate relationships. And Sally is really focused on being more interested in what others have to say, because there's a lot to learn there. And if we do a good job of listening, we can be more effective in our networking. So she's interested rather than trying to be interesting.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard this quote, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in proportion. And Sally does a good job at that.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think you hit on the word relationships, and so many people think, okay, well, I've got limited time, so I'm going to get in and do networking, and I got to talk to as many people as I can. But right. Relationships take time, don't they? I mean, don't you think you should go into one of those meetings not really expecting to get any business right away, because it's going to take time?
for sure. I mean, they're not sales meetings, and you don't know if your ideal client may or may not be in the room, but even if they're in the room, you know, how many people buy upon the first meeting with somebody? Usually people want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
So we have to think about building some credibility, and a lot of that can start with an initial impression. So we have to keep in mind, what is our initial impression in these networking events?
Right.
What kind of impression are we making?
Yeah, another thing I've heard about networking, a statistic, and I don't know how many people does like the average person know? I don't know if you have that statistic from one of your presentations.
I do. Yeah, we are all walking around with about 250 to 1,000 people behind us.
Right.
So, you know, in our network, and obviously we have a tighter network of those we know really well. But then there's this broader network. We have connections through all these different chapters in our life. You know, our school days and where we grew up, and you know, our neighborhood, and maybe a religious community and a work community, and you know, if you have kids, there's connections through their activities, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got big networks, and you never know who knows someone that you need to meet.
Right.
And so again, it comes to making that good first impression and seeing what you can do to give first.
Yeah, and what do you think about this concept of going to a networking function, not necessarily to sell anything, but to find out maybe there's a need that you have that's not even related to business, and you may meet someone there who knows somebody, and you achieve something else through that as well?
Absolutely. I think besides building relationships for the hope that you might, you know, increase your business, we can build relationships in the hope that we'll have broad toolkits, right, so that we get answers to our questions. We have resources for people that need something from us. So that's another side of networking, besides, you know, hoping to grow business, is growing your toolkit so that when somebody you know needs something, you got a guy.
Right.
So that's definitely half of it.
Now, my wife is involved in a little business, and she does some networking group things, and she says, oh, I don't really have a lot of time for doing this. What do you say to the person that says, you know, I don't, you know, they've got busy schedules? Because networking really takes a commitment. You can't just go once. You know, right. You don't want that card pushing person to come in and only be there for one meeting. You know, right. You kind of have to build trust over time. How do you work the time management into it and justify it, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I think it's being intentional about your networking. So, you know, there are all kinds of different types of networking meetings and organizations and associations at which you can network. I mean, we can network in the grocery store, but it's being intentional about how you're going to go about networking. So if it's all right, I'll share some things you could do before you even get to a networking event to make sure that the time there is worthwhile.
Well, as a professional organizer, I know you always have something prepared beforehand. So yeah, I mean, and thinking about that time, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, I've even heard this, it's like, you know, think about what you're going to do, just don't show up. So what are some of those preparation tips? Yeah.
So being intentional would include understanding what your purpose is for networking. So is it to, you know, start to cultivate relationships with people that may need your services? Is it to broaden your toolkit? Do you have a question on your mind? One of my employees is going to be doing some networking in the near future, and she's got this burning question about, you know, strategies for business development that work well for other successful people. So she's going to go into these networking events with that one question that she might ask, and it's non-intrusive. It's just, you know, what works really well for you in making sales calls, for example. So you can go in with an intention or a purpose of getting a question answered. So know what your purpose is, because that will help you choose where to network and where to go, where to begin. So that's step one. Once you've chosen an event or a meeting or a place to network, learn a little bit more about it and about the people that are going to be there, because it doesn't work to do the spray and pray. Right. What does work is to go in hoping to meet maybe 2 or 3 people with which you could have a connection, and with who you might have a reason to follow up afterwards. So if you have an attendee list available to you, or you can learn a little bit more about the organization and what they're about and what type of people might be there, that's a really good thing to do ahead of time as well.
Okay. Yeah. So are there any other things? You know, some people will talk about visualization, you know, visualize yourself in a certain situation when you're there and think about that beforehand. Do you buy into that stuff?
I I think visualization is great, especially if you're a little nervous about networking, or like myself, I'm more of an introvert, so I have to get kind of geared up and in the right mindset to walk into a room full of strangers.
Right.
So I think doing some visualization about how that might go and what might be a success is really helpful.
Right.
I think if you can go in at least being aware of or kind of having practiced what your defining statement is, because you're going to be asked, what do you do?
Right.
So, we need to be ready to answer that question. And I think instead of just giving your job title, for me to say, well, I'm a professional organizer and a productivity consultant, if I can come in with something that might get a little bit more interest, like, well, I help busy professionals make better use of their time and space so they have more time for what matters most.
Right.
You want to have something that gets people to say, well, tell me more about that.
Exactly.
So having practiced that could make you feel more confident and ready.
Well, and also having a question like that that's kind of open-ended too, maybe there where you get conversation going, because you just don't want to just go throw up on somebody, right?
Exactly. Right. Nobody likes to be thrown up on.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we've talked about the beforehand tips, but I bet, knowing you have tips for during and after, because that follow-up is always key too. So we'll catch those after the break here. We're with Debbie Rosemont talking about effective networking, and we'll be right back. Would your family be able to easily access your important documents for a major life event? Having your key life documents organized helps ensure that your wishes and assets are managed, retained, and distributed as needed while being less stressful for you and your loved ones. The Life Document Organizer Kit helps you to organize and store key life documents like wills and trusts, healthcare directives, investment and retirement plans, marital documents, key personal contacts, and more. Life events that might trigger a need for these documents include a health condition where someone may need to take over certain responsibilities, or decisions regarding care or communicating your wishes regarding your assets. And access to these important documents is key. The Smead Life Documents Organizer Kit is divided into 6 color-coded sections. Each section contains individual folders that pertain to that section. The Smead Wheel of Organization provides an easy reference and guide to recommend what documents should be stored within each section. The Life Documents Organizer Kit has the flexibility to expand by adding additional categories that are specific to your own situation. Being prepared can alleviate your own stress and the stress of others. Keep your life and the documents that matter most in order with the Life Documents Organizer Kit. From Smead, keeping you organized. We are back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about how to be an effective networking. And of course, we have Debbie Rosemont here from Simply Placed, and Debbie as a certified professional organizer, doing those things that involve networking also involve being organized. So of course we talked before the break about what do you do beforehand, and then once you get there, I got a tip. Someone shared this with me. I can't attribute it to anybody, but they said if you're kind of more introverted, which believe it or not I am, and you go to one of these meetings, I would tend to be the guy like standing in the corner. I'm not pushy at all. So someone said, well, here's what you do. Get to the networking group about 20 or 30 minutes early before everybody's there, and then just stand by the door. And as people walk in, you say, hi, you shake their hand, you welcome them like you're the host.
Act as a greeter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I thought, that is a good idea. So I've tried that a few times. And that seems to, because everybody is there kind of, not everybody knows everybody. And you kind of assume that, well, everybody knows everybody except me. At least that's what goes in my mind. So let's talk about some of those tips of, okay, you're at the networking event now. What do you do?
Yeah. So if you've done a good job with the first part, which is being prepared, when you're at that networking event, the next step is really just to be present. And I think being present involves a few different things. One is focusing on the person that you're with. So again, it doesn't feel good when you're talking with someone and you're constantly looking over their shoulder at who's coming in next. Because you feel like, well, they're not really interested in what I have to say. They're wondering, what are they missing out on, or who else could be more interesting. So that's one thing, is really focus on, with your eye contact, with your mind, and, with all intention on the person that you're with at the time. And, there can be strategies for ending one conversation and moving away to another, because we don't, necessarily want to be just with the one person the whole time, but focus while you're there on that one person. I also think there's a stance that you can have when you're networking physically that invites people to come up and talk to you. And that's about, again, being open. So open body language rather than, standing there with your arm crossed. You have that great strategy of being a greeter and you're reaching out your hand first, and that's inviting. So people will want to talk to you. If you're talking to one other person, you can make sure you're standing almost in a V that would invite somebody else to come join your conversation, because we know how hard it is. Those of us that are introverts, I'm one too, to break into a conversation of two people. So the other thing is, as an introvert, that's you, know that there's others of you in the room, and so seek out those other people that might be standing by themselves and strike up a conversation.
Yeah. How about that? You alluded to the strategies for ending a conversation. Do you have any examples of what that might look like or sound like?
Well, there's a couple ways to do it. My favorite way, and I think it makes you look great, is if you've really been listening, and if you happen to know anybody else in the room, if you've been listening and you can then help introduce the person you're with to another, it's almost like a warm handoff. So, if you and I have been talking, John, and you mentioned something about, you're in the market for, you're looking for a new CRM, a new customer relationship management tool. So we're talking about that. And I know somebody else in the room who's recently implemented a new CRM. Then when I'm ready to leave the conversation, it would be natural for me to say, John, I would like to introduce you to, Susan. She's recently implemented a new CRM. I think you have a lot to talk about. And then I can excuse myself and then just say, I'll let you two take it from here. So a warm introduction or a handoff is a nice way, and my favorite way, to break out of a conversation. You don't leave somebody standing by themselves, and you're giving to them. You've proven it, you've listened, and you're there, and you're helping them. So that's my favorite way. Okay.
Well, that's. I think those are good, really good points. Now, have we kind of covered everything we need for the while you're there? I guess I have one more question about that, because some networking groups are actually formal groups where, you get 1 minute, everybody gets 1 minute to speak or 2 minutes to speak. How do you manage those situations?
Again, I think that comes back to being prepared. So know what if you know that's going to happen, then you can practice and have ahead of time. And it doesn't need to sound scripted, but know what your 1 minute is. Right. And again, this is more about the practice or the preparation lets you be in a position to hear what other people are saying. Because when we're not ready with our own 1 minute, guess what we're doing when everybody else is giving theirs?
Yeah.
Any guesses?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're thinking about and obsessed with what we're going to say. We're not in a position to listen, so you're not going to get as much out of that interaction. When we know what we're going to say and we feel confident about, telling people what we do in 1 minute roughly, we're good to go. We can hear other people. So, I think be ready for that, especially if you know that that's going to happen. And then you're in a position to listen, to be interested. And when it comes to your turn, you've got it down.
Right. Yeah, no, those are great points. All right, let's talk about now the networking meeting is over. Do you do any last minute things as you're walking out the door, or what's the next step?
So the idea of not spraying your card around, we do, however, want to be able to follow up with people we're interested in having more conversation with. So my strategy for that is, instead of just giving your card to everybody you speak to, or even those you don't, is ask for cards from those who you intend to follow up, or from whom you like to learn more. Right. So as, again, a way to exit a conversation or to even exit the room, you can say something like, John, I've loved meeting you. I think maybe we have more to talk about. Could I get your card? Would it be all right with you if I followed up afterward?
Right.
Or to say, I'd love to learn more about your business and what you do. Do you have a card with you? Could I get that from you? When you do, before you leave the room, and not necessarily right in front of the person, but if you could flip that card over and just jot a quick note to yourself about one thing in that conversation or interaction that will trigger your memory later. Because if you leave with 5 or 6 cards, to remember that John was the guy whose son also played soccer, like maybe that was the connection, or whose favorite food was sushi, or whatever it was that will help you remember that person later. Right. Gives you something to work with for that follow-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, those are great tips. Yeah. How about once you're back at your office, do you do like an email or a phone, or how would you follow up with some of these people?
So the first thing I would suggest is to block out time on your calendar to do whatever follow-up you're going to do. And that's, I'm asked that all the time. What's the best method for follow-up? Is it email? Is it a thank you card? Is it a phone call? And I say, whatever you're going to do, just do it consistently. And we need to block out time. Otherwise, we have good intentions, but it'll never happen.
Right. So
for every networking event you put on your calendar, I would suggest putting in a block of time, maybe 30 minutes, later that day or the next day to do your follow-up right away. That follow-up can include entering cards into your contacts management system or your database so that you capture those especially that you're interested in connecting with. I think a gracious, quick, even if you don't have anything else you need or want to share at this time, it was great to meet you at the event yesterday. I hope our paths cross again soon. That's just, it's just nice, and it gets your information in their inbox. Often we have in our signature, our website, or links to social media. Somebody may choose to connect with you there. Connecting with people on LinkedIn could be another strategy, or Facebook, or wherever it is that you do social media. That can be another follow-up strategy. Writing a handwritten note is a really nice touch. And then inviting a follow-up conversation if that's truly what your intention is, and if you didn't have enough time. And scheduling that with them, possibly by picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'd love to meet. Can you compare calendars and pick a time?
Right. Well, these are all phenomenal tips. We're just about out of time. I want to give you the opportunity for your 1-minute commercial where you stand up. I know you're already standing up, but no, where we can talk about your business. But before we do that, if you were to take and sum it all up into one point about networking, what's the most important thing?
I think it's understanding that networking is a tool to help make connection, help build relationships. And if you're strategic about it, and if you prepare ahead of time, if you're present in the event, and then the magic is in the follow-up. If you do that follow-up in an organized, systematic fashion, it can be really effective.
That's great. Okay, now let's do a little networking with our audience. Tell them about your business, what kind of clients you work with, and how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. So Simply Placed, we're based in the Seattle, Washington area. Our website is www.itssimplyplaced.com. And we serve busy professionals who need to get more done in less time and have less stress so that they have more time to focus on what matters most to them. We do group training and individual consultations in companies and with their employees to help them be more organized and productive so they can focus on their priorities.
Well, Debbie, as usual, it's great to network with you here on the podcast.
Right.
Hopefully people will take our recommendation that they should be contacting you for your services. And we'll talk more next time we get together, because I'm sure we'll network again, won't we?
I'm sure we will.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. You are ready to go out and create some business by networking, but remembering that relationships are the key to building a good network. And we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized. Coming up next time on Keeping You Organized.
That means we have to change how we approach things, and doing a spring cleaning and really a fall cleaning 6 months later is the best way to handle those extra projects that you don't do every week or 2 weeks in your maintenance cleaning, and yet those things are important and they need to get done.